The shuttle's landing struts sank a few centimeters into black grit, and the whole craft shivered as if the planet disliked being touched. Through the small oval window, the training basin looked quiet from a distance, low ridges like broken teeth, sparse brush clinging to the stone, and a sky that carried two pale suns with no softness in their light. Heat shimmered close to the ground, but the air itself felt thin, sharp, and dry, the kind that stole moisture from lips before a person noticed. Inside the cabin, the cadets had stopped talking. Even the loud ones had learned silence during descent, when the hull began to sing from turbulence, and the instructor at the front did not bother to reassure anyone. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, uniform pressed flat, rank marks polished to the point of menace. When the shuttle finally settled and the locks engaged, he waited until the last vibration faded. Only then did he turn. "Welcome to Field Module 17, he said. His voice was calm in the way a knife was calm. "Local designation, Karen Basin. Ecological designation, volatile. Survival designation, instructional." A few cadets shifted. One male cadet with scaled cheeks glanced at his neighbor as if expecting a joke. Another male cadet tightened his grip around the straps of his pack. The human sat near the center aisle, posture straight, eyes steady, attention fixed on the instructor's mouth rather than the badge. He listened like a person listening for the line that mattered. The instructor lifted a slate, and the cabin's lighting dimmed as a projection spread across the ceiling. A warning symbol appeared first, a circle, red, with a stylized flame slashed through it. Under the symbol, a legal heading scrolled in crisp block text. "Directive 9, the instructor said. Absolute ban on open combustion." A murmur moved through the cadets like wind through dry grass. Someone whispered, "No cooking," with the tone of a person hearing a sentence of exile. The instructor raised one finger, and the sound stopped. "This is not an inconvenience," he continued. "This is a line written in blood. The ban exists because prior cohorts treated this basin like a campsite. Fires spread through resin brush. Smoke drew apex predators from 3 valleys. A single spark ignited volatile spores and cooked a team inside its shelter. After-action reports described screaming that did not stop for 7 minutes. He let the last number hang, clinical and cruel. The projection changed. Grainy footage showed a ridgeline catching, flame racing along the ground faster than legs could carry a person. Another clip showed a tent collapsing into a bright bloom as if the air itself was flammable. A third showed a silhouette running, then falling, then not moving. The instructor looked at the cadets one by one, pausing on faces that tried to look brave. No flames, no embers, no heated filaments, no chemical burners, no plasma lighters, no friction ignition. His gaze settled on the human for a heartbeat longer than the rest, as if expecting defiance from a species with a reputation for making fire out of stubbornness. "If your gear produces a spark, you will remove the component, or you will be removed from the module." One female cadet raised her hand slowly, the motion hesitant. "Instructor, what about heat packs? Medical? Permitted only if sealed and certified," he cut in. "And if I find you using a medical heat pack to warm your meal, I will write you up for falsifying medical intent." The human did not raise his hand. He waited. His face did not change, but his mind began sorting the directive into parts. What was forbidden, what was not explicitly forbidden, and what the instructor assumed no one would be clever enough to attempt. The projection continued to scroll, and the human's eyes followed it with the patience of a person reading a contract. The legal text was specific. It defined open combustion as a self-sustaining oxidation reaction producing visible flame or incandescence in atmospheric conditions. It listed examples. It listed penalties. It listed fines that meant nothing to a cadet in a survival basin, and it listed expulsion, which meant everything. The instructor tapped the slate, and the projection shifted to a list of permitted tools: knives, filters, rope, shelter fabric, basic med kits, a limited ration pack. No stoves, no fuel, no ignition sources. Even the standard emergency flare had been removed. The instructor wanted hunger to become a pressure that pushed mistakes out of the cadets. He wanted raw food to grind morale down and make obedience feel like relief. "Your evaluation begins the moment the hatch opens," he said. "You will disembark in groups of 4. You will establish shelter before dark. You will secure water. You will maintain operational silence after second sunfall. You will not light fires, even if you think you are dying. If you violate the ban, the basin will punish you faster than I can." A male cadet with broad shoulders finally spoke, unable to hold it. "How are we supposed to process food? Raw intake is—" "Your physiology is your problem," the instructor replied. "This is a survival module, not a hospitality tour. Eat what you can. If you cannot, adapt. Hunger is an instructor that never lies." The human's gaze dropped for a moment to his own ration pouch clipped at his hip. The packaging was standardized, emergency nutrient bricks designed to be edible to multiple species. The human knew the taste already. Chalky, bitter, engineered to keep a body moving, not to keep a mind hopeful. In past modules, cooking had been more than comfort. Cooking had been a way to turn unfamiliar proteins into something safe, to reduce parasites, to make questionable water tolerable. Fire was the oldest tool for making the wild less hostile. Removing it was not a rule. It was an attack on a fundamental strategy. He looked back up and watched the instructor's expression. The man enjoyed this. The man had chosen this basin because it made cadets miserable. Misery made them compliant, made them grateful for authority, made them easier to shape. The human returned to the legal heading and read it again. Absolute ban on open combustion. The words were not poetic. The words were measurable. Open combustion. Not heat, not cooking, not thermal processing. The ban was written by officials who feared flames, not by officials who understood every way energy could be moved into matter. The instructor deactivated the projection, and the cabin lights returned to normal. A soft chime sounded, and the hatch seals released with a heavy clunk that echoed through the shuttle's frame. Hot, dry air slipped inside like an intruder. "Final reminder," the instructor said, raising his voice above the hatch mechanism. "I will conduct random inspections. I will search your shelters. I will examine your waste. If I smell smoke, you will not get a warning. If I see soot, you will not get a warning. If I find a single charred fragment, you will not get a warning. Understood?" A chorus of tense voices answered yes. The human answered yes as well, because yes did not mean surrender. Yes meant acknowledgement of the boundary. A boundary was useful. A boundary told a person where to dig. The cadets filed out. Boots hit grit. The basin's heat pressed into skin. Far away, something moved along a ridge. Too large to be a bird, too smooth to be a shadow. The humans' group gathered near a marker post, a metal stake driven into the ground with coordinates stamped on it. His assigned teammates glanced around with tight expressions, already thinking about shelter and water and predators. One female cadet swallowed hard and adjusted her pack straps. One male cadet scanned the horizon with a nervous quickness. Another male cadet muttered a curse in his own language, then stopped when he realized the instructor was close enough to hear. The human did not waste time staring at the sky. He crouched and picked up a stone. It was dark, almost black, with a fine grain that suggested volcanic origin. He rolled it between his fingers. The surface was rough, but it held warmth even now, as if it had been drinking sunlight all morning. He set it down and picked up another, lighter in color, more porous, less dense. This one felt cooler. He put it aside. Heat capacity, he thought. Thermal mass. A person did not need flame to cook. A person needed controlled heat. Heat existed here in abundance. 2 suns poured it down like punishment. The ground stored it. The rocks stored it. The air itself became an oven at midday. The ban did not remove energy from the environment. It only removed the most obvious method of harnessing it. He stood and adjusted his pack. His eyes flicked toward the instructor, who watched from the hatch area like a judge at the start of a trial. The instructor's gaze snagged on the human's hand holding the stone, and for a moment suspicion crossed his face. Then the instructor looked away, satisfied. A stone was harmless. A stone could not burn. A stone did not violate Directive 9. The human's mouth tightened slightly, not in a smile, but in recognition of an opening. His group began walking toward the nearest scrub line, where sparse growth promised shade and perhaps insect life. As he walked, the human quietly sorted his plan into steps. First, water and shelter like everyone else. Second, identify materials that could store and transfer heat without igniting: dense stones, clay, damp soil, reflective scrap. Third, locate a place where heat could be applied away from open air, so even if something charred, no flame would appear. Fourth, keep the process clean. No smoke, no soot, no dramatic signs for the instructor to sniff out. The ban was meant to humble him by stripping away a human advantage. Instead, it presented a puzzle with clear constraints. Puzzles did not humble him. Puzzles focused him. Behind him, the shuttle hatch sealed shut, and the instructor's voice carried one last time through an external speaker. "Remember," he said, as if speaking to the basin itself. "No fire." The human did not look back. He looked at the sunlit rocks ahead, at the dry soil that could be shaped into pits, at the harsh light that could be redirected. In his mind, the word fire narrowed into its legal definition, and everything outside that definition became available. He walked into the basin with empty hands in the eyes of the rule, and with a full toolbox in his head. The basin settled into its afternoon rhythm with ruthless efficiency. Light from the twin suns pressed down until shadows thinned and crawled close to the feet of rocks and brush. The human finished securing the shelter frame just as the heat reached its peak, fabric pulled tight and angled to deflect wind rather than block warmth. He stepped back, assessed the structure, and then turned his attention away from camp. Shelter kept a body alive. Food kept a mind sharp. He needed the second before the first began to feel like a waiting room for failure. He moved alone, not because isolation was safer, but because attention was dangerous. His group focused on water filtration and perimeter markers, tasks visible enough to reassure an instructor watching from afar. The human carried nothing that looked purposeful, only an empty mesh sack slung over one shoulder. To an observer, he appeared to be scavenging like everyone else. In truth, he was selecting. The stones mattered. He walked the slope where the ground darkened, where old flows had once cooled and cracked into slabs and chunks. He knelt often, pressing his palm flat against surfaces, ignoring the grit biting into skin. Some rocks burned hot immediately, heat sharp and fleeting, unsuitable for storage. Others felt warm but shallow, heat fading within seconds. He rejected those without hesitation. He searched for density, for weight disproportionate to size, for surfaces that held warmth like memory rather than sensation. When he found one, he lifted it carefully and turned it in his hands. The stone was dark, almost black, with a dull sheen that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. He held it for 10 slow breaths. The warmth did not fade. He smiled then, brief and private, and slid the stone into the mesh sack. He repeated the process again and again, ignoring smaller pieces and jagged shards. He wanted mass. He wanted inertia. By the time the sack grew heavy, sweat traced clean lines through the dust on his forearms. The suns began their slow descent, and the air lost its worst edge, though the ground still radiated stored heat like a held grudge. On the way back, he passed another group arguing in low, exhausted voices. A male cadet kicked at the dirt and cursed the ban. A female cadet clutched a ration brick and stared at it as if insulted by its existence. The human did not slow. Complaints wasted daylight. At camp, he spread the stones out in a shallow depression near the shelter, arranging them so each piece touched at least 2 others. Contact mattered. Heat moved best with cooperation. He adjusted angles, nudged edges closer, and then stepped back. The stones drank the remaining sunlight greedily, surfaces darkening as if satisfied. He left them there. While the stones worked, he worked elsewhere. He dug with a flat piece of scrap plating scavenged from a broken equipment crate, carving a pit just deep enough to hide contents from direct view. The soil resisted at first, dry and stubborn, but yielded with persistence. He lined the pit with lighter stones, the porous ones he had rejected earlier. Those stones would insulate, not store. Above the pit, he wove a loose cover from fibrous leaves and thin branches, something that would hold shape without sealing completely. Steam needed containment, not suffocation. By the time the suns dipped low, the stones at the surface radiated a gentle, persistent heat. He tested one with the back of his fingers and pulled away quickly, satisfied. No glow, no smoke, no sign of combustion, only energy, moved from sky to stone. He carried the first stone to the pit using a folded strip of cloth. The weight tugged at his shoulder as he lowered it into place. A faint hiss rose when residual moisture in the soil met the heat, but the sound faded quickly. He placed another and another, building a hot core within the earth itself. When the last stone settled, the pit pulsed with invisible warmth. Protein came next. Earlier, he had trapped a small, burrowing creature near the scrub line, dispatched it cleanly, and prepared it without ceremony. Now he wrapped the meat in broad leaves thick enough to resist tearing, layering them carefully to create a barrier between flesh and stone. He added a splash of filtered water, just enough to flash into steam, and sealed the pit with the woven cover and packed soil. He sat back on his heels and waited. Around him, the basin cooled in stages. Wind picked up, carrying fine dust that whispered across fabric and skin. Distant calls echoed from the ridges, low and resonant, reminders of the things that ruled this place after dark. The human remained still, counting time by breath and by the slow shift of color in the sky. When he opened the pit, aroma rose first. It was faint, controlled, contained, but unmistakable. Cooked meat, rendered fat, something warm and alive in a place that preferred everything raw and sharp. He inhaled once, then covered the pit again and waited another few minutes. Patience mattered. Rushing ruined results. At last, he uncovered the meal fully. The leaves peeled back easily, damp and darkened. The meat beneath had changed color, fibers relaxed, surface glossy. He cut into it with his knife. Steam escaped in a thin, quiet ribbon and vanished immediately into the cooling air. He ate slowly, chewing with care. The flavor was simple but profound, not because it was exceptional, but because it was normal. Normality restored balance. Each bite reinforced the correctness of the method. A shadow fell across the edge of the camp. The human did not look up immediately. He finished the bite in his mouth, swallowed, and then raised his head. The instructor stood a short distance away, hands clasped behind his back as before, posture rigid, eyes sharp. His gaze flicked from the pit to the stones and back again. "I smell food," the instructor said. "Yes," the human replied. The instructor's eyes narrowed. "Explain." The human gestured calmly toward the stones resting nearby, now cooling, surfaces dull and harmless. "Solar-heated stones," he said. "No ignition source, no combustion, no flame, heat transfer only." The instructor crouched and inspected the pit, fingers hovering close but never touching. He sniffed once, then again. His expression shifted, irritation mixing with reluctant interest. "There is no smoke," the instructor said. "No," the human agreed. "No char," the instructor added. "No," the human repeated. The instructor straightened slowly. "You are walking a line." "I am staying inside it," the human said. For a long moment, neither spoke. Wind moved between them, carrying dust and distant sound. At last, the instructor turned away. "Be careful," he said. "Others will try to copy you." The human watched him leave, then returned to his meal. Copying was inevitable. Understanding was rarer. As night settled fully over the basin, the stones around the pit cooled completely, surrendering their stored energy back to the earth. The human cleaned every trace of his work, scattering soil, rinsing leaves, erasing signs. When he lay down to rest, his stomach warm and satisfied, he catalogued improvements in his mind: deeper pits, better insulation, more efficient stone selection. Fire was forbidden. Heat, however, was everywhere, waiting for someone patient enough to remember how to ask for it without lighting a match. The basin reacted to the second night with tension. Sound carried farther in the cooling air, every movement sharper, every mistake louder. The human woke before the false dawn, body already alert, senses tuned to the rhythm of the place. He listened to wind sliding over stone, to distant movement along the ridges, to the subtle shift in pressure that meant the suns would rise clear and brutal again. Hunger did not gnaw at him the way it did at others. Warm food the night before had done more than fill his stomach. It had anchored his focus. By mid-morning, attention found him. It began with glances, lingering looks from nearby camps. Cadets who had ignored him before now tracked his movements with open curiosity. One male cadet approached under the pretense of trading filtration mesh, eyes flicking repeatedly toward the cleared patch of ground near the human's shelter. The human kept his answers short and his hands empty. He had expected imitation. He had not expected subtlety. By midday, the instructor arrived with a sensor unit clipped to his belt. The device hummed softly as the instructor walked the perimeter, sweeping the basin in slow arcs. Thermal variance mapping, the kind used to detect concealed heat sources without relying on visible signs. The instructor stopped twice, frowned, recalibrated, and continued. The human watched from the shade of his shelter, expression neutral, pulse steady. The sensor chirped once. The instructor turned sharply and followed the sound to a shallow depression not far from the human's camp. He knelt, brushed soil aside, and exposed a faintly warm patch of earth. No smoke rose. No discoloration marked the ground. Still, the heat was undeniable. The instructor straightened and looked directly at the human. "Explain this," he said. The human stepped forward calmly. "Residual heat," he said. "Captured and released slowly. No active source." The instructor activated the sensor again and swept it lower. The readout showed elevated temperature gradients but no point source. Heat dispersed evenly, unnatural only in its neatness. "This basin does not like heat trapped below ground," the instructor said. "It shifts soil chemistry. It attracts certain species." "I accounted for that," the human replied. "The pit is shallow. The insulation limits spread." The instructor studied him for a long moment, then turned the sensor off. "Your methods are drawing attention," he said. "Both mine and the basin's." The human inclined his head slightly. "Understood." That evening the wind changed. Clouds gathered low and fast, thick with moisture pulled from distant systems. When rain fell, it did not patter. It struck the ground hard, hissing where droplets met stone still warm from the suns. The basin exhaled steam in scattered plumes, natural vents opening and closing like breaths. The human moved quickly. Rain was opportunity. He dug a new pit beyond his shelter, deeper this time, sloped to allow runoff. He lined it carefully with stones heated earlier in the day, then poured collected rainwater into the cavity. Steam rose instantly, thick and white, but the cloud dispersed quickly into the broader haze forming across the basin. No single plume stood out. Everything steamed tonight. He placed food inside, wrapped tightly, sealed the pit, and weighted it with soil and rock. The process was cleaner than before, quieter, more efficient. Steam transferred heat evenly, penetrated fibers, softened without burning. He monitored pressure with practiced patience, adjusting the seal when necessary. When he opened the pit later, the results surpassed the previous meal. Meat fell apart under gentle pressure. Roots softened into something sweet and sustaining. He ate half and stored the rest, sealing it against scavengers. He was not alone for long. A female cadet approached as he cleaned the site, movements careful, voice low. "I smelled it again," she said. "It's different. Not smoke." "Steam," he replied. She hesitated. "Can you show me?" He considered her for a moment. Her posture was cautious but not desperate. Her hands were steady. She watched his face, not his tools. "Yes," he said, "but not here." They walked to the edge of the scrub line where the ground dipped and natural rock formations shielded sight lines. He demonstrated without flourish, explaining principles rather than steps. Heat retention, moisture control, containment without ignition. She listened intently, asked precise questions, adapted the process to her own physiology and supplies. By nightfall, 3 more cadets had learned. The instructor noticed the pattern by the 3rd day. Thermal readings appeared across the basin, scattered, low level, controlled. No flames, no violations. Yet morale shifted. Cadets moved with more energy. Arguments quieted. Hunger lost its edge. The instructor called the human forward during the evening inspection. "You are altering the module," he said flatly. "I am surviving," the human replied. "You are teaching," the instructor corrected. The human met his gaze. Instruction was not prohibited. The instructor's jaw tightened. "If this escalates, command will intervene." "Then command will need to clarify the directive," the human said. That night, the basin tested boundaries. A large predator moved close, drawn by scent and warmth both. The ground vibrated faintly under its steps. Camps fell silent, bodies tense inside shelters. The creature circled, curious, cautious. The human waited until the animal paused near a steaming vent formed by the rain. He adjusted one of his pits, releasing a sudden burst of hot vapor into the air. The sound startled the predator. The unfamiliar sensation confused it. Steam rolled across the ground, masking human scent, blurring outlines. The creature retreated. By morning, the instructor had amended his patrol routes. Steam pits dotted the basin now, some crude, some elegant. Cadets traded stones, knowledge, improvements. No fires burned, no rules were broken. Yet the basin no longer starved its occupants into submission. The human sat beside his shelter, watching sunlight catch on damp stone, reflecting heat into places chosen with care. He refined angles. He tested depth. He noted which soils held moisture best and which leaked it away. Fire had been banned to strip control. Steam returned it quietly, invisibly, turning the ground itself into a tool. The basin entered a new phase once the clouds burned away and the sky returned to its merciless clarity. Moisture retreated into cracks and deeper layers of soil, steam vents faded, and the suns reclaimed dominance. Heat no longer lingered in the ground as generously as before. Steam pits still worked, but efficiency dropped, and the human felt the shift immediately. Adaptation was not a single act. It was a chain. He watched the light, not casually, not with annoyance, but with calculation. The suns traced predictable arcs, their angles shifting just enough each day to change how shadows fell against stone and metal. Light here was not gentle. It was forceful, almost physical, pressing down with intent. Most cadets avoided it, worked around it, cursed it. The humans studied it. The first reflector was an accident. A fragment of emergency plating lay half-buried near a collapsed supply crate, surface scarred but still faintly reflective. The human lifted it, wiped dust away with his sleeve, and noticed how the light jumped when he tilted it. A bright line crawled across the ground, sharp enough to sting the eyes. He adjusted the angle again, and the line tightened into a spot. The soil smoked faintly. He froze, then smiled slowly. Smoke dispersed instantly, no sustained source, no combustion. The soil had simply dried too fast. He adjusted the plate, widened the reflection, and the effect softened into heat without reaction. He held the plate steady and felt warmth bloom where light gathered. That night, he dismantled nothing important. He scavenged instead. polished armor fragments discarded by cadets who had misjudged weight, curved ration containers with metallic interiors, even a cracked visor lens, its coating still capable of directing light. He brought everything back to camp and laid the pieces out like a puzzle. Angles mattered more than surface area. Curvature mattered more than polish. He experimented patiently, propping fragments with stones, shifting degrees one by one, watching how light behaved. Some arrangements scattered energy uselessly. Others focused it too tightly, risking visible reactions. He marked those mentally and avoided them. By midday, he had a frame. 2 vertical supports anchored in packed soil. A shallow arc of reflective pieces bound together with wire and fiber, flexible enough to adjust, but stable enough to hold shape. He positioned it carefully, testing alignment until the focal point hovered just above the ground. He placed a dark stone beneath the focus. Minutes passed. The stone warmed, then heated, then became almost painful to touch. No flame appeared, no glow. Just controlled accumulation of energy pulled straight from the sky. He repositioned the reflector slightly and added a second stone. Heat spread evenly between them. This time, he did not hide the process. Curiosity spread faster than hunger now. Cadets gathered at a cautious distance, shielding eyes, whispering. One male cadet laughed once, sharp and disbelieving, then stopped when the human calmly placed a metal cup beneath the focused light and poured water into it. Steam rose within minutes. The instructor arrived shortly after, drawn by the sudden cluster of bodies. He took in the structure with a single sweep of his eyes, jaw tightening as understanding followed. "You are pushing," he said. "I am refining," the human replied. The instructor circled the reflector slowly, watching how the human adjusted angles with small, precise movements. He crouched near the focal point, careful not to cross into the light's path. He extended a hand near the heated stone and pulled it back quickly. "No flame," the instructor said. "No combustion," the human agreed. "This borders on weaponized light," the instructor said. "It borders on cooking," the human replied. The instructor straightened. "You realize command did not anticipate this." "That is not my responsibility," the human said. The instructor stared at him for a long moment, then stepped back. "If this blinds someone, burns someone, or triggers an environmental response, the responsibility will become yours." The human inclined his head. "Understood." Solar cooking spread faster than steam pits ever had. Reflectors appeared across the basin in countless variations, some crude, some elegant. Cadets adapted designs to their species, their materials, their patience. Flatbread baked slowly on heated plates. Water boiled without fuel. Nutrient paste transformed into something textured and warm. Trade emerged naturally. Polished surfaces became valuable. Knowledge became currency. The human did not hoard either. He corrected dangerous setups, dismantled overly aggressive focuses, taught how to diffuse light safely. Control mattered more than speed. The basin changed. Scent profiles shifted as food cooked openly under the suns. Predators adapted, some avoiding camps altogether, confused by heat without flame, others drawn closer until startled away by sudden bursts of reflected light redirected deliberately. The human learned to use reflectors defensively, flashing brightness across approach paths without harm, training local fauna to associate camps with discomfort rather than reward. The instructor filed reports nightly. Command responded with questions, then silence. On the 5th day, an inspection team arrived in orbit but did not land. Drones passed overhead, scanning, recording, analyzing. The human continued working openly, adjusting reflectors, assisting others, his methods visible from above and impossible to categorize as violations. One evening, as the suns dipped low and light softened just enough to work comfortably, the instructor approached again. "You have turned survival into infrastructure," he said. The human did not look up from adjusting a reflector. "Infrastructure improves survival. This module was designed to break habits, the instructor said. Then it should have broken assumptions, the human replied. The instructor exhaled slowly. Command wants documentation. The human paused. Formal? Yes. Reviewed? Yes. The human nodded. I will prepare it. That night, instead of sleeping early, he wrote. Not with drama, not with defiance, but with precision. Diagrams, definitions, thermal transfer without combustion, solar concentration within safe thresholds, environmental impact assessments, risk mitigation. He titled the document carefully. Thermal processing via passive solar redirection. No mention of cooking. No mention of comfort. Only survival efficiency. When dawn came, reflectors across the basin caught the first light in quiet unison, turning a hostile sky into a shared resource. Cadets moved with purpose now, not desperation. Hunger no longer dictated mistakes. Fire remained banned. The suns, however, had never been forbidden. The human delivered the documentation at midday, when the sun stood high enough to make every metal surface glare. He walked to the instructor's portable command shelter with a rolled sheet of polymer paper sealed in a watertight sleeve, because electronics failed too often in the basin's dust and heat. The instructor accepted it without ceremony, scanned the title, and made a small sound through his nose that might have been contempt or reluctant respect. He did not invite the human inside. He did not need to. The message was meant for command, not for conversation. Within an hour, the first drone arrived. It did not descend like the training shuttle had. It came in clean and silent, a dark shape that cut across the pale sky and stopped directly above the basin as if suspended by invisible threads. A second followed, then a third, forming a loose triangle over the training area. Each drone carried sensors more sensitive than the instructor's handheld unit. Each drone moved with the patience of a predator that did not need to hurry. The cadets noticed immediately. Reflectors that had glittered openly in the sun were tilted down or covered with cloth. Steam pits were sealed. Movement became careful. Even with no fire in sight, the idea of scrutiny tightened throats. The human did not hide his work. He adjusted his largest reflector slowly, ensured the focal point rested on a dark stone rather than bare soil, and set a metal cup beneath a broader spread of light. Water began to tremble at the surface. No smoke rose. No scent drifted far. Nothing about the process resembled a flame, but the result challenged the purpose of the ban. Warm food, boiled water, stable morale. The instructor approached again, eyes flicking between the drones and the reflector. Command has questions, he said. The human kept his hands steady on the frame. Command can read answers. Command is considering an amendment, the instructor said, voice controlled. Not in your favor. Directive 9 is about combustion, the human replied. My methods do not combust. The instructor's jaw tightened. Command may redefine. The human nodded once, accepting the possibility without fear. Definitions require boundaries. The instructor looked at him sharply, as if hearing an insult wrapped inside a neutral statement. You speak like a legal officer. I read like a legal officer, the human said. That evening, an official transmission came through the instructor's beacon, amplified across the basin so every cadet could hear. The voice belonged to a woman, clipped and precise, carrying the calm authority of someone who could end a career with a sentence. Field Module 17, she said. This is Command Auditor Celis Var. Maintain position. Maintain compliance. This audit concerns Directive 9 and environmental risk controls. Violations will be enforced. The instructor stood very straight when the name echoed. The human watched his posture shift. The instructor had threatened expulsion. The auditor could order it with a signature. At dawn, the auditor arrived in person. A small shuttle set down on the basin's edge, landing cleanly on reinforced plates deployed from its belly. The air around it shimmered with residual heat from its descent systems, and the irony was not lost on anyone. The hatch opened and the woman stepped out in a sealed field suit, visor dark, gait measured. 2 guards followed, both male, both carrying sensor rigs and restraint tools. The instructor walked forward to meet her, pride and caution fighting inside his stride. The auditor did not waste time with greetings. She looked past the instructor at the basin dotted with reflectors and pits and improvised infrastructure, and her head tilted slightly as if listening to a story the ground was telling. "Show me the source," she said. The instructor's eyes flicked toward the human. "Cadet," he called. His voice carried an edge that tried to reclaim authority. "Present your method." The human stepped forward, hands empty, posture calm. He kept his movements slow to avoid looking theatrical. He led the auditor to his primary reflector, pointed at the frame, the binding, the angle controls. He described materials and safety measures in plain terms. He did not embellish. He did not apologize. The auditor crouched near the focal stone and extended a gloved hand close enough to register heat. She withdrew it and checked her suit's sensor readout. "Thermal concentration," she said. "Passive redirection," the human replied. "No ignition." One guard swept the area with a chemical sniffer. Then another guard used a particulate scanner along the soil. The devices chirped, then fell silent. "No combustion byproducts," the first guard reported. "No soot," the second guard added. The auditor stood and turned her visor toward the instructor. "Your directive prohibits open combustion. This is not combustion." "It produces cooked food," the instructor said, as if the result itself were evidence of wrongdoing. "It produces heat transfer," the auditor replied. "The outcome is irrelevant if the mechanism stays within compliance." The instructor's face tightened. "The spirit of the ban—" "The spirit does not stand in court," the auditor said, voice still calm. "Text stands." The instructor forced his hands behind his back again, the old habit returning under pressure. "The basin is volatile," he said. "Heat attracts predators. Heat changes soil chemistry. Heat concentrates risk." "Risk exists with or without flame," the auditor replied. "Your job is to manage risk, not to cultivate suffering." The words landed harder than any insult. Several cadets lowered their heads quickly, hiding expressions. The human kept his gaze level. He had not come to humiliate the instructor. Humiliation was simply what happened when a rule relied on intimidation instead of clarity. The auditor turned back to the human. "Your documentation," she said. He handed her the sealed polymer roll. She opened it, scanned the diagrams, paused at the risk section, and read longer. The visor hid her eyes, but her stillness revealed attention. After several minutes, she rolled the paper back up. "You included thresholds," she said. "Focal limits, diffusion ranges, safe distance markers." "Yes," the human replied. "Concentrated light can injure. I prevented injury." The auditor nodded once. "You also included environmental mitigation." "Yes," he said. "Depth limits, soil insulation, scent control, steam vent camouflage during moisture events." The auditor turned slightly, addressing the basin rather than a person. "Directive 9 will be amended today," she said. "The amendment will not permit flame. The amendment will define allowable thermal processing methods, including passive solar redirection and sealed conduction pits, under regulated parameters." The instructor's shoulders shifted as if a load had been placed across them. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, understanding he had lost the argument at the only level that mattered. The auditor continued. "Field Module 17 will also be reclassified, not as a punitive module, but as an advanced resourcefulness module. Instruction will focus on constrained innovation and environmental compliance. Cadets will be evaluated on adaptation under strict definitions, not on needless deprivation." One male cadet exhaled shakily, relief almost audible. A female cadet pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes bright with something close to victory. The instructor remained rigid, but his rigidity now looked less like authority and more like a statue refusing to admit the wind had changed. The auditor faced the human again. "Cadet," she said, Your methods prevented rule-breaking while improving survivability and reducing panic-driven violations. Command recognizes that value. The human inclined his head. Acknowledged. Your instructor will incorporate your documentation into official training materials, she said, then added with a subtle shift in tone, under proper credit. The instructor's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He could not refuse without defying command. The audit concluded quickly after that. The guards completed scans across several camps, found no flames, no embers, no hidden ignition tools. The drones rose and departed in the same clean silence that had announced them. By evening, the basin looked different, not in terrain, but in posture. Cadets stood straighter. Work became organized rather than frantic. Reflectors were positioned with safety markers and shared guidelines. Steam pits were sealed with standard depth limits. Food cooked without secrecy. Water boiled without fear. Compliance stopped feeling like a trap and started feeling like a system. The instructor approached the human one last time as the suns lowered, light turning copper across the rocks. His voice was quieter than it had ever been in the module. "You could have hidden your work," he said. "Yes," the human replied. "You could have let others fail," the instructor said. "Yes," the human said again. The instructor held his gaze, and for the first time his expression contained something other than control. It contained calculation mixed with grudging honesty. "Why didn't you?" he asked. The human looked at the reflector, at the controlled spot of heat warming a stone, at the absence of flame in a world that feared flame. "Because rules should teach," he said. "If a rule only punishes, a person learns to lie." The instructor's eyes flicked away, as if the sentence had struck a place he protected. After a moment, he nodded once, stiffly. "Pack your gear," he said. "Extraction is at dawn." The next morning, the shuttle returned. Cadets boarded with lighter faces and heavier knowledge. The basin remained hostile, but it no longer felt like a cage built for cruelty. As the hatch closed, the human caught one last glimpse of the reflector field below, small mirrors catching sunlight.